All right, fabulous, Emily. Thank you for that overview. Hey, everybody. And again, welcome to week 7, workshop 6 for OnRamp. We are excited to have you here tonight. Again, my name is Thom Webster. I am your founder in residence and host for these weekly activities that we're doing here to provide you real content from real experts who really do what it is that we're talking about each week. And tonight's workshop, I know, is the one you've been waiting for, and you got to be excited to hear from, because tonight's activity is about Show Me the Money. We have real funders here with tonight, lenders, and we have an exciting panel bringing 3 different perspectives of how they look at it, and they will go into their introductions when I finish going over some basic housekeeping, but just want you to understand we have a perspective tonight from SVC Impact, which is a venture group. We have a perspective tonight from an angel investor, and we have a perspective from a debt investor. And these are people who are in the business every day of providing money. That's the business they look to. That's the business they get up and go to work for. And they're always looking for deals. So that's why I know you have to be excited about having this opportunity tonight to connect. So I know you're ready. I know you've been preparing. So I expect nothing but the best from the participants who've been attending these workshops on a weekly basis. Also too, last Friday, you finally got the information about OnRamp's pitch competition. Our pitch competition announcement came out last Friday. And as you saw from the information you received, the guidelines around the pitch competition is starting with a 2-step process. Step 1 is that you have to submit a video pitch. The video pitch is due tomorrow night at 11:59 p.m., no later than 11:59. After those submission, we will select up to potentially 10 submissions that will move on to round 2. In round 2, you will actually do a live virtual pitch on July 8th to a panel of experts. And the panel those experts will decide who are going to be the 3 winners. As we originally announced with this program, we had a cash award of $5,000. I don't know if you realize when the information went out, the cash award is now up to $9,000. That's one of the delays that took so long. So the top 3 winners will be receiving not only a cash award, but also in kind, which we're really excited about also too. First place will be $5,000. Second place will be $2,500. Third place will be $1,500. In addition to that, all 3 winners will receive membership in the Philadelphia PAC, an amazing organization of angel investors where you connect with people in the room who are doing business, investing in companies every day. Not only do you get a 1-year membership, as part of that membership, you get assigned a dedicated mentor on their new initiative that they call Mentor Connect. So not only do you get a year membership in the organization, you're actually going to get an angel investor assigned to you to work with you for a year to help you address your capital needs. So that's what we're real excited about. That's what took a little delay in finalizing everything. But this opportunity for you to really accelerate your entrepreneurship journey and really build your business to the next level, this pitch competition is going to go a long way. So tonight's panelists are dynamic individuals that I'm very excited about. I know 2 of them extremely well. I have a relationship with one through the organization that he's from. And tonight's perspective is that they're going to give you, from their view, what they look at and how they approach deal making in terms of providing capital. We have Jim Burnett from VestedIn, which is a community bank who specializes in giving money to small businesses. That's 85% of his lending. We have Lawrence Williams from SVC Impact, which is an impact venture fund that looks to invest in companies that are having impact in the community. And we got Glen Gaddy, who is from the PAC itself, which is a network of angel investors that is the leading angel investor network in the Philadelphia region. Each of these gentlemen are going to give you their perspective and and how they look at not only lending money and investing, but also too what they look for in deals. This is an opportunity to ask questions. So I know you got 1,000 questions to ask. And what I'm going to do is start off with having each of them guys, Glenn, Jim, and Lawrence, just give not only a brief background on you and what you do, but why you do what you do. And why is that important to you? And what took you on this journey, this personal journey, to do what it is that you do, and that is look to provide people capital. I don't know who wants to start first. Lawrence, Glenn, Jim. If any of you want to start first, please feel free to get started.
Sure. I'll start first. So again, my name is Lawrence Williams. I work with Social Venture Circle here in Philadelphia, helping them do ecosystem development. I'm also working with the Decarceration Fund, which is a fund focused on early stage startups that are focused on ethically disrupting the criminal justice system. My story, my background kind of starts with that, but I'll go back even to college. You know, I went to Howard University, was a double major in finance and computer information systems, kind of followed in my father's footsteps, who was kind of in the biotech, private equity space, longtime entrepreneur. And my mother was a lieutenant in the Philadelphia Police Department. So came out of, you know, Howard University, went into the product marketing kind of tech side of that computer information space, with Fiserv, the fintech company. While I was there, based in Atlanta, moved into starting my own startup called The Moves. Was very fortunate to have an early exit, and then went to work with one of the investors in my company. And I kind of got really interested in the idea of not just really creating one product, but empowering other people in their ideas. And that's kind of what helped me move over to the investment side. And while I was working with that investor, which is Kiwi Tech / Kiwi Venture Partners, the pandemic happened. So I did that for about 2 years. The pandemic happened, and I came back home to Philadelphia, and I really tried to figure out, you know, how could I take these new investing chops and try to get into the impact space and invest into Black and brown entrepreneurs, and, you know, minorities, people that could really use the information I was learning. So that's where I moved into Social Venture Circle, and start to try to help them with deal flow, try to figure out, you know, people that want to mobilize capital, you know, in this area, how could I help them? And that's when I moved into, met up with the Decarceration Fund. And for me, that kind of tied in, you know, my dad's side, which is being an entrepreneur, being a funder, but then also tying in the injustices that we face, and looking at the legal system and how I could combine those two of my journey. So that's kind of like why I'm at where I'm at, and, you know, the bio on me.
Glenn?
Sure. I'm Glen Gaddy. I'm managing member at Robinhood Ventures. Robinhood Ventures is an angel investing group of about 75 members based in Philadelphia. We've been around just over 20 years now. We do the earliest of early stage investing. So as a result, about half of our portfolio are companies that have recently spun out of universities or incubators or accelerators, or are just fledgling enterprises. We tend to favor companies that are focused on a technological advantage in the marketplace. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a monster portfolio of patents, but it does mean that you have to be able to do something that other people can't readily do. Sometimes that's market knowledge. Sometimes it's the ability to perceive a market gap that others don't. But ultimately, that's what we're looking for, are entrepreneurs that see the world differently, and as a result, are favored in their potential outcomes. We are predominantly an equity investor. We like to be patient capital. We like to get in early. We like to be intimately involved, either mentoring leaders, serving on boards, opening doors, all of those sorts of things, because that's where we can provide the greatest value. as early stage investors, we also recognize that one of our significant roles is in helping first-time entrepreneurs recognize where their blind spots are and seek to overcome them. And so we work hand in hand with virtually all of our portfolio CEOs. We do occasionally find some that have been there, done that, and they can say, hey, we're good. We don't need that help. But for the most part, we're intimately involved with all of our portfolio companies. So that's where we are. We traditionally have held our meetings at the Science Center, but as we all understand, this is a different world than what we traditionally did. And now we're seeking where the new normal is. And one of the great things about this evening is that we all get to sort of see what a hybrid model can look like. So I'm excited not only for being able to talk to everybody, but also to see how well this hybrid model works. Jim, I think it's your turn.
Thank you, Glenn. Again, I'm Jim Burnett. I'm the Executive Director for VestedIn. We are a nonprofit community development financial institution. We're certified by the Treasury Department to provide capital typically to low-income communities and businesses with low-income owners. Our territory is actually the 7 counties in and around Philadelphia that include Camden County in New Jersey and also Newcastle County in Delaware. I've been doing this for about 20 years. Prior to that, I spent 15 years in banking as a commercial lender and traveled up and down the East Coast a lot. So a lot of my background experiences in providing debt and that debt coming in where you actually have to have a revenue stream to support any of the payments that you need on the loans. I got into the business primarily because I traveled to Chicago to visit my father and saw a lot of the disparity between one side of the street and another. And in Chicago, there's a lot of separation of wealth and low income, not unlike in places in Philadelphia, but it just seemed to be as a young man from Philadelphia that it was just a lot stronger there. And I just wondered why, in particular, Black people don't have the same wealth as others. And so coming to the banking industry, I studied accounting, then switched to finance because to me, accounting was after the fact. Things actually had to happen before you can get some accounting, but with finance, you can create, and there's creativity around it. And how do we make things happen? And I really love that about providing resources for people. And now as we start to grow VestedIn, and our direction for that is really focused on business, but also how that business impacts the community in which it's located, and then how we impact the individual who we're investing in, because that individual doesn't act or live alone. They have family, they have kids, they have friends and neighbors, and all of that is impacted by the investment that we make in them. And so we try to do all of that at one time, which is a little difficult, but is what we're trying to do to focus on.
Guys, thank you for a great overview introduction about your different perspective about how you provide what you look for in delivering money as a tool to help businesses grow and invest. So I want to ask one question. This is the question that, to get this conversation started. And the real question is that a lot of times you guys get a lot of deals that come across your desk. And in making those deals, there are always your traditional underwriting criteria that you look to evaluate based on, your funding requirements and how whether if you're a private fund, how you're guided by your structured, or if you're a regulated fund like Jim, how you're guided by the law. But there's always something that when you get an opportunity to evaluate the deal and meet with the company, there's something that always excites you, or that can excite you, or that you look for, in terms of identifying what motivates you and makes you enthusiastic about looking at working with that potential company to get the deal done and to help them with their cash needs. And so my question to you is that What is it that you look for when you meet with a company besides the traditional stuff that gets you motivated and enthusiastic about trying to get the deal done? Whoever wants to start first.
I'd love to start on that, because this is the reason why I got into early stage in the first place. I look for somebody that has an idea, a concept, a business, a model that makes me go, wow, I wish I had thought of that. That's where I get really drawn in, where it's, it can be a really simple solution, but there is elegance and simplicity. It can be a really limited market, but it can be an opportunity that's really significant. So I don't look at those other aspects. If somebody grabs me with the, oh, wow, I wish I had thought of that, then I'm ready to really dig in and learn more about it. Because to me, that's where you've got a fundamental difference with entrepreneurs. Yeah, look, big corporate entities, they've got lots of people working on problems that are very specific to the markets they're already attacking. Entrepreneurs are like, I got this big idea. I don't know where it goes, but it's a big idea. That to me makes it really, really cool. And that's what I look for.
Yeah, and that was interesting, Glenn, because when you and I had that discussion, we were talking about what drove us to be, capital providers in terms of what we do individually. And it's those things that excite us that says, you know what, I never thought about it that way, because, we all come from different worlds, but to move to the capital side, it's like, wow, what drew me to that is something new and different that I hadn't experienced before. So thank you for that. Lawrence, Jim, your response to the question?
Yeah, I can go next. I think that for me, it has to deal with the people that we're dealing with. And the one I'm looking for their drive, because we give folks a lot of stuff to do. As a debt provider, I need your tax returns, I need a story, I need your history, and I need you, more importantly, to understand all of that stuff and be able to articulate it. So if we don't feel kind of that you're enthusiastic about this, then we kind of lose a lot of interest very quickly. I think the other piece that we try to look for is really kind of you understanding that we actually play an important role in your business. And I don't mean just us as a CDFI, but I mean us as capital providers, and appreciating the role that we play in helping you to grow your business. We're not there to hurt you. We do take collateral and those sorts of things, but we're really there to try to drive your success and want to provide you with as much resources as possible. So you having that openness to trust that I'm asking you for these things that are important for our decision-making purposes and not fighting us in that process really makes the process a lot easier.
And I'll follow up on that, and I'll follow up on Jim's first point, is that mainly what I look at is the management team, right? There's a saying in early stage investing, you bet on the jockey, not the horse. So you kind of want to really believe in, who's running the show. And then not only that, we like to see teams as opposed to individuals, because there's only so much that one individual person can do, even if they're a superstar. If you think about even LeBron, right? LeBron still needs a team. He needs someone to pass it to. Also, we like to see the diverse teams. So teams that have different perspectives, that come from different areas, not just for, your D&I kind of checkbox, but because you're able to come from different perspectives and let the best idea win, right? If you have the same kind of, people, they kind of have similar perspectives. And then, you want not only just talent, but you want people that have the disposition to be a great team member, right? People that have the disposition to be great managers of others, the grit and drive to be willing to not only take a pay cut to build out the vision, but, people that have the ambition for that. And so those are some of the things I look at.
Okay. All right. my group is being kind of quiet tonight.
Was it our turn to talk?
It's always your turn to talk. Feel free to get started. You know, this is how OnRamp works.
Don't get me started. Tell him, Jim. This is Broderick.
Hey, Broderick.
I have a few questions. I'm only going to ask one or two, and then if I get a chance, I'll ask some others. Which question I really want to have? To Glenn and Lawrence, because I believe you guys are more on the investment side. So my question to you is that, is it, as a business looking for an investor, a couple of things. Is it best to find an investor who's willing to be a lead investor versus someone who is kind of tag along or wait and see? Question one. Question two, should I be concerned, not me personally, but should I be concerned about age discrimination as relates to VC capital? You know, if I'm over 60 years old, you know, and Zap, I see you smiling. If you're over a certain age, I mean, is there a obstacle that we need to overcome? And I'll stop there, and if I got time, I'll ask some other questions.
Jim and Lawrence, that was directed to the VCs.
Glenn, do you want to go first, or you want me to jump in?
Go ahead, Lawrence.
Okay, so the first question, I remember the last question first, so about the age discrimination. I don't think so, because like I was saying, I think that the main thing that I look for is kind of the experience and how you can kind of tailor your story. I think it's more so about how you tailor your story towards why you're going to be effective in the market, why this idea is tailored to you, and why you're the best leader for the situation. And I think, you know, with a lot of even angel investors, right, early stage investors, you know, they kind of appreciate that experience as opposed to maybe, you know, some later stage VCs, you know, that might be looking for something different. So I would say it's more so about the story that you tell and how you're able to articulate that story and make it compelling, as opposed to thinking about being limited by, you know, your age. And if you could remind me of the first question.
The second or the first question was about lead investors. And again, if I am going after or looking for an investor, where should my focus be? And I say lead investor, or investor obviously has a passion in what I'm doing, but I'll use the words or terms lead investor.
I would say, I would say that you want to project your story out as much as possible and garner as much attention and investment as much as you can. It's always great to have a champion, and it's always great to have a lead, and you're going to have to find a lead. But I would say get out there as much as possible, try to get as many people and make your story as compelling as possible, even to a lead. If you have more dollars that are depending on that lead, that story is a little bit more compelling, as opposed to just focusing on the lead and then trying to find the ancillary people afterwards. So I wouldn't specifically target a lead. You do want a lead, it's important, but what's more important is that you drive your story home, how you tell your story, and the interest that you can garner in with that runway that you're trying to build and what you're trying to build out with your company.
Glenn?
Yeah, from my standpoint, it's a little different. When you say lead, we typically take that as who's going to write the term sheet, who's going to negotiate the deal.
Right.
Who's going to get down to the brass tacks. So the issue is, if you're finding a lot of investors that are all saying to you, yeah, get back to me once you have a lead, the problem is they're committing to you before they've seen the terms. And that usually means more of them fall away once they see the terms, unless the terms are really, really, really good, in which case you keep them on. So it's a dance, Broderick, and it's a dance that even on my side of the dance is always difficult. We lead deals, we syndicate deals, we follow on deals, okay? But we really, really, really want to see a company get from our first involvement with them to fully funded as quickly as they possibly can. Because the more time you're spending running around trying to, shake seat cushions to get quarters out of, the less time you are spending executing on the plan that we're investing in anyway.
Right.
Right. So for me, the biggest thing is, I don't care what, you bring a term sheet and I know who wrote it. If it's an SVC term sheet and they're asking us to come in on it, I'm good with that. I know who probably wrote it, or one of the 3 or 4 people that probably did. I know that's all good. We're fine there. I just want you going forth to execute on the business plan as soon as possible. I don't want you chasing money for extended periods of time. And that actually is the answer with regards to the age discrimination question.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest differences we see in age cohort versus approach to raising money. The more experience you have, especially in the industry that your startup is in, the more likely you are to get a deal done and move back to executing on the deal. Then people, and there is an entire generation, and I'm looking at faces, and we do have a few on here, that have been raised in the Shark Tank generation, who seem to believe that part of what they should do as a CEO is to always be raising money. Okay, if you're always raising money, something went wrong. That's my thought process. That's not a fact. That's my thought. I want people executing on plan and moving forward, not raising money all the time. CEOs need to be proficient at raising money, but they need to be excellent at leading an organization. And those are 2 different skill sets.
Great input. Thank you, Glenn.
Yeah, and I think also too, Lawrence and Glenn, you made 2 great points here. And part of it is really understanding the difference between, seeking capital, raising money, and leading an organization. And what people often get confused in these early stage companies is, instead of the focus in terms of how do I go to market, how do I commercialize my idea, how do I find customers, how do I build a market presence, how do I understand how to penetrate the market, they get focused on how do I find investors. And the opportunity there is that if you can get customers, if you can get market penetration, if you can drive sales or show the potential to drive sales, but all you need is capital to close on those sales, the likelihood of attracting investment has all of a sudden greatly enhanced, either from the equity side or from the debt side. Jim, one of the things you look at when you look to lend money is that what kind of, not only kind of revenue are they generating, but what kind of pipeline that they have. Can you touch on that?
Sure. I mean, you're absolutely right. And we look at the historical cash flow of the business and whether you've been able to generate revenue. But the idea is really, are you going to continue and grow? I agree with Glenn. We're investing you not to stay the same. We're investing in you to grow so that we can get you, in a lot of cases, to be bankable. And so we want our investment really to get paid back at some point in time, but it's only going to get paid back with enough revenue to pay all your expenses and then pay your debt service. And so what we try to do is to make sure that there is enough cash flow out of that to make sure that everybody's getting paid. So yes, we're constantly looking at your projection, contracts that you have, how you're getting your inventory in. One of the things that's really important with some of our borrowers right now is inventory. Can they get goods and services? I mean, it is really difficult to get product, especially if they were getting product from China or somewhere outside of the US, where a lot of the product is being slowed down. So that changes your cash flow. You just change from getting inventory on maybe a 6-month basis to getting it on a 9-month basis. You're still carrying older inventory. You're just not moving enough product as you need to. And you need to understand that. And I love what Lawrence was saying about being able to articulate it. And when we ask you these questions, if you start to fumble around and you can't articulate the answers, that's where the challenge becomes, that we're kind of like, you know what, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. Sound like a good idea, but we'll pass on it this time.
Yeah. Okay, we have a few questions in the chat. So here's one from Han. What's the average amount of equity an investor tends to ask for, and what makes someone ask for a specific amount? So that's a Lawrence and Glenn question.
Glenn, I can start off on this one. At the seed stage level, we generally look for high single digits, low double digits amount of equity. And we write check sizes, at the fund, generally somewhere between, say, 350 and 500. At SVC, maybe somewhere between 100 and 400K. And generally, what we're looking for with that equity amount is that we want to be able to, have a meaningful amount of equity as we continue on through the later stages of the investment, right? So, that's generally what we're looking at.
Glenn?
Yeah, this is the classic, what's the valuation question? And the answer is, I don't know. Because, what Lawrence says is absolutely 100% correct. We're concerned not so much how much of the company we're getting on day one, but how much of the company we may have at some point in the future. So if we've got dilution protection, maybe we'll take less up front, knowing that we're not going to get diluted on the next round. If we don't have that, then maybe we need to get more up front. The 5 to 20 range is generally where early stage investors look to come in, assuming two things. Number one, we're not looking for control, and we are not control investors. So that's the first thing. We're investing in you to execute on your company. We're not looking to come in and scoop your company out from underneath you. There are investors that do that. That's not us. That's not a typical angel. So that's one. The second part of it, though, is what we need to know is there's a balance between protecting our interests and encouraging the founders to be successful. And if we take too much for ourselves and the founders all walk away, we're left with nothing because we don't want to run the company. That's not our business model. So that becomes a lot of negotiation, but it also is a secondary discussion that needs to happen to make sure all the investors are okay with where we are coming in, because we do syndicate a lot of deals, but that the founders are in a good place to remain motivated in order to push the ball up the hill, push the stone up the hill, because that's a lot of what being an entrepreneur is about.
Yeah, that's good. And just for the sake, not taking anything for granted, Glenn or Lawrence, can you, or even Jim, because I know can you just for the audience to make sure everybody understands what dilution means? Not assuming everybody understands. Jim, Lawrence, Glenn, anybody?
I'll jump in. Everybody knows nature abhors a vacuum. So look, dilution is when you are giving away a certain amount of your company. On day one, before you raise any money, the company is yours, or whatever the group of founders. So you have 100% of that company. Every time you raise money, your interests are diluted. So say I buy 20% of your company. You own 80, I own 20, but we need to raise more money. And money comes in and you get diluted more, meaning your percent goes down, my percent goes down, because we're bringing on yet another investor. That's the dilution that we're referring to here. There's some other dilution that can come about with regards to if you've got debt that's accumulating in a convertible note that does convert. For those of you that have heard of a SAFE, those are often with a discount, so there's some implied dilution that comes with that. But what it means is more money coming in, you own less.
Thank you for that. All right, next question in the chat is, how involved do angel investors get in developing the business they have invested in?
I'll take that as well to start, because we get very involved in the way that the founders need and want, and that's the important part. That needs to be a dialogue, and it starts when we first are introduced to companies. It carries through the entire due diligence process where we're digging deep into the company and the opportunity, but it is especially the case once we fund it. I don't rewrite companies' business plans. That's not my job, okay? That's not what I'm interested in doing. I might make a suggestion to an entrepreneur along the lines of, have you thought about this market, or have you thought about doing it differently, and those sorts of things. But if we're investing in the model that the founders want to carry forward. And that's really important. I can rewrite. I've seen enough business plans and enough pitch decks in the last 15 years. I can spin virtually any pitch deck in a different way if you ask me to, but that's not my role. If the founders aren't committed to their vision, it's very difficult for us to get committed to their vision. So as a result, it really needs to be them, not mine.
Gotcha.
I agree with everything Glenn said, and I'll just add on that generally one of the criteria is when we're investing is how can we help them? You know, how does, you know, some of our experience, some of our connections, how can we leverage that, you know, towards their goal and what they're doing, right? And if we can't really help them, you know, the best entrepreneurs have their choice of capital sources, right? So if we can't really help them, then our value proposition becomes a lot less compelling, right? So we are already, like he said, in the very beginning, when we're actually being introduced to the company, when we're going through due diligence, we're trying to figure out how we can play that role as a teammate for them, besides the capital, you know, what we can do for them. And I think he addressed everything else.
Okay, another question is, what is the difference in what you're looking for in companies at a seed round of investment versus a Series A? I don't even know. I don't think Glenn, do you do many Series A?
Yeah, here's the problem I have with this. I want to hear what Lawrence says about this also. Those are just words. You know, there is not a whole lot of difference in many ways between a pre-seed, a seed, and an A in many cases. Okay, we do them all. Okay, sometimes they look really, really similar. So ultimately, I don't know what the distinction is. If whoever asked the question, you know, wants to really drill down and define those, and I can, you know, add insight, that's fine. But the issue I have is this first money? Is this your first money from a professional investor? Let's talk about three things. Entrepreneurs often raise money in three different ways early on: from their credit cards or from their own personal wealth first. Second, from friends, families, and unfortunately at times fools. Okay, so that's the people that will invest in you because they like you. They may not be savvy enough to understand the business or anything else, but they really like you and they'll invest in you. And then the third are angels, early stage, and sometimes other groups like incubator accelerators who really are all about taking a 80% of the way cooked thing and getting it all the way to 100%. Okay, but it is professional investors because we look for things that we understand that we know we can help with. And this is what Lawrence said. If I can't help an entrepreneur, I'm the wrong investor because I'm just dumb money. And that puts me in the friends, families, and fools category, not the smart money early stage investor category. And I want to be smart money. I want to be able to contribute to the success of my portfolio companies. And so ultimately, if what you're talking about is that first professional money, sometimes it's titled pre-seed. Sometimes it's, we've got one deal that they brought us in on the B round. They just happened to have some really affluent friends and family that did their A round. Doesn't happen very often, but we do see it. So it's a continuum, and the definitions are quite fluid.
Lawrence,
And
did you want
Tom,
to
I
add to
just
that?
want to, yeah, Tom,
Yeah,
I
go
just
ahead,
wanna
Jim.
throw on top of that, even when you're looking at debt, probably banks aren't going to be looking at as much as these guys are in terms of the resources that they have, but they too, and us as CDFIs, absolutely want to bring additional resources to you, to your growth. Again, it is on our best interest to make sure you succeed, because that's how we get paid back and can do this with other investments. So that there is that opportunity. And when you are looking for investors, you should be interviewing them also, so that you can decide, is this what I need for my business? Because if it's not, you should turn it away and walk away from it also.
Yeah, good advice, Jim. Lawrence, you said you had something to add.
Yeah, really quickly. I mean, everything Glenn said was perfectly correct. I would just say that if you're thinking about classically what you would think about the difference between a seed stage and Series A, you know, everything's fluid and evaluations are out of control now to some degree. But the main difference would probably be traction, right? So if you talk about, you know, at the seed stage level, you're thinking about, you know, there's some level of commercial revenue, you know, your post-product, post-revenue, but you're still bearing a lot of market risk, right? Generally, once you start to get in Series A, Series B, you're starting to think about growth and how you start to accelerate that traction, how you start to accelerate that growth. And obviously, like he said, there's a lot, you know, it's very situational based. We'd love to kind of dive into the details, but if you just had to ask me a, you know, generic question, that's what I would say. It's more so about looking at the traction and where that traction is going, and maybe doing a discounted cash flow, or starting to look at, you know, your revenues and projecting from there, as opposed to looking at the market opportunity and what you can potentially get from that.
Good. Here's a great question. Somebody asked, let's talk about it from the entrepreneur standpoint. I want to hear about what you hear and see when you meet with companies who want to borrow money from you. What are the things that act as triggers for you, or things that turn you off when it comes to you looking at deals? That's a question for all of you.
I was going to say they led with the borrow money, so I thought it was going to Jim. I thought I got away easy on this one. The issue, and I'm sorry, this always comes up for us. Many great startups started as side hustles. I ran a side hustle of my own for 17 years, and it was the most successful exit I ever had. Okay, so I fully appreciate the value of a side hustle. But investors struggle to invest in side hustles because the side hustle is never the scalable amount of time that the founders have, because they still have the quote unquote day job. So one of our biggest issues when we're looking at companies is, and it used to be, we would never consider investing in a side hustle. We've moved off of that because sometimes the side hustle really benefits from the day job, because the day job's informing the side hustle. So as a result, why would you walk away until you're properly prepared to. But that's one of the things that we really have to make sure that there is alignment between where we're putting our money and where the founders want to go on a personal basis. So that's the one that jumps out there for me, Tom.
Okay. Lawrence, Jim?
Yeah, I just would agree 100%. I think Glenn hit it right on the nail on the head. I need you to be the guy or the woman in this and be all in. It gets really hard to have your focus in a lot of different places and you losing bandwidth to be able to really drive what we want to be, which is, again, your successful company. So I understand the concern from especially a lot of startup businesses where you do have the side hustle, might be income that you need to generate, so you can't give up the day job. So it's really great when you get to the position when you can do that and then come and see us and we'll see what we can do.
And Tom, I just want to be clear. The question is, what are a turn off from the investor standpoint?
From the investor perspective, what do you look for, in somebody that you want to do a deal with? And what is it that what have you experienced and what have you seen that makes sense to you, that doesn't make sense to you?
Okay, well, I think the one thing that doesn't make sense to us, I was thinking kind of like when you're looking at a deal, what is normally like a turnoff, and I would say, if your data isn't correct or if you say that we don't have any competitors, that's probably the number one thing that can make the pitch meeting go wrong, is that you don't have any competitors, no one's in the space and we're the first people doing it. That's probably the number one thing you shouldn't do. You always have to make sure that you have your data correct, your I's, dotted and T's crossed.
Tom, I got one more thing, and Lawrence kind of triggered it in my head, is when we ask, so what's the risk to your business? And you tell me nothing. And I just kind of like, well, give me two things that could go wrong. No, nothing's going to go wrong. It's perfect. This is just the way it's going to be. I've done all. No, you haven't. And there are opportunities for it to screw up. So think about those, address the problems, because if you're not addressing the problems, there's not a lot I can do. This is your business.
Okay, here's another one. How would you make the decision on investing in an innovative technology-based medical healthcare product, which takes a long time to commercialize?
Lawrence, if you want this one first, otherwise I'm happy to comment on it.
Go for it. I'll follow.
Okay. For any of you that are, playing at home and you've already Googled Robinhood Ventures, you do understand that our portfolio is almost 50% companies that are right in that area. We do a lot of drug therapeutics and medical device companies, often with very, very long regulatory pathways, whether that's with the FDA or CE or any of the other regulatory agencies around the world. So we understand that, and that gets back to an earlier questions about, who's your right investor or what does the investor look for. We expect the founders to understand that because we understand it, and we expect that their model takes that into consideration and that the end opportunity is big enough to be able to offset the need for capital between now and then. So that's a recognition standpoint, and it gets to Jim's comment. If they come in and they go, look, we've got a differentiated product and it's going to cure cancer, and we're going to be in the market in 18 months. We're going to look at them and go, actually, no, you're not. You're not. It's just, it doesn't happen that way. And so as a result, yeah, that's as bad for us as you don't have any competition. That's one of those where we're like, nah, you just don't understand what it's going to take you to get from where you are today to success. And success is measured in different ways for different investors. And I was going to get to this, but I'll give it just a moment now. As equity investors, you need to be able to pay us back. And that's usually as a result of selling the company or having an IPO, an initial public offering. Okay? We are beholden to you from the day you cash our check as equity investors until what we call a liquidity event happens. So if your timeline and our timeline don't agree, that leads to a whole lot of conflict. And that's not what we want with our portfolio companies. So it's much better to go in and go, look, we're on a 7-year pathway. Here's how much capital it's going to take. We understand you're going to get us to this interim standpoint, but then we'll be able to go to this VC or that VC. And we've already had that conversation. They just want to see us get to that interim, and then they'll come in. Those are discussions you got to have up front so that you can manage the expectations of your investors.
Yeah. Lawrence, you want to add to that?
Sure. I was going to say, actually, Social Venture Circle really doesn't invest in medical / pharmaceutical because we don't have the expertise, right? So when we were talking about how can we add value, what do we know? Do we invest in things that we know? We don't really do that, even though it falls under impact, because when we step into doing due diligence, we don't have the people, the horses to actually look at that and say if this is a good deal or not. Even though, and also too, in the medical kind of field, the valuations are higher and the exits are usually a little bit higher, right? So based on what your check size is, you could be outpriced. It could be a little expensive for the individual angel. So there's a lot of different things. This is something that we would probably look to a Robinhood Ventures to maybe, see what their opinion on it is and look at their due diligence. So that's probably from a Social Venture Circle what my opinion would be on that.
Okay. Jim, did you want to add something into it from your vast experience?
No, I think these guys hit it. I'm willing to move on to the next question.
The next question is that can you guys get into a further definition of how you define risk in a deal, and what's the difference between risk and risk management?
So for us, risk is about you trying to figure out where your business has challenges. And honestly, it's as simple as that. Risk management is slightly different. We talk to businesses about actually, you are identifying an asset, right? You're identifying this asset. Here's an opportunity for that asset. Next thing you're doing is trying to grow the asset. But at some point, you have to protect the asset too. So what are the things that you're putting in place to protect the asset? Especially this comes around a lot for us in real estate when we make real estate investments. Do you have all the appropriate insurances? Are the people who are working on your property, do they have the appropriate insurances? Especially after COVID, there's a huge amount of risk management that came into play with a lot of businesses. Am I going to have my employees on the property or not having them on the property? That's more of the risk management. The general risk in analyzing your company that we go through is, what are the things that can go wrong? It's kind of like those 5 C's of credit. Is there government conditions out there that could change and make your business change? Is your lack of capital a challenge? Do we have enough collateral to make this deal work? Those are the things that we're looking for in your ability to identify risk. And then what are the mitigants that you're putting in place to let me know that, yeah, this is out here, this is a possibility, but here's how we're going to get around it.
Yeah. Glenn, Lawrence.
So when I think about risk, I think about a couple different things, right? So at the seed stage level, I think about, product risk, right? So what exactly are you selling? Sometimes you can get too big and want to add every feature, right? But sometimes you have to focus on your niche. What exactly are you doing? Where's your target customers? And kind of like what is the product you're selling? And you think about like actually like the market risk, right? So what is out there? Who is buying what you're selling, right? How can you make where you're operating kind of a niche and you can dominate that area? Can you be top 5 when someone looks up, startups in the criminal justice system, and investing in them? How can you make yourself that top 5, right? So there's market risks, there's risk with the team, will they be fit within the team? Will they be able to, take that next step forward? Like I said, we look at, the jockey's not the horse, right? So who, is pushing things forward? Will they be able to execute? But when I think about, the other side, I more so think about risk mitigation, right? So what decisions are you going to make as a company to avoid certain landmines? And that's more of like a strategy piece to me than, just the different types of risks. But I'm not sure if I addressed the question directly, but I did.
That was a good response.
Okay.
Glenn, and then Michael, I see you have your hand up. I'll ask you next.
I'll just add a little bit. There are no shortages of categories around risk that should be considered. Every interaction that any company has, internally and externally, potentially has a risk factor that can be associated with it. So as a result, you've got personnel risk, you've got governance risk, you've got regulatory risk, you've got supply chain risk, you've got product risk, you've got R&D risk if you're on that. So there's no shortage. Just look at, my suggestion is you look at your business and you try to minimize a negative outcome of any interaction that occurs. And if you've done that, you've probably gone 90+% of the way to mitigating all the risk that you can mitigate.
So that was a great question. And I think more importantly, what people want to take away from the response to that every business, every venture has risk. The question is that, do you understand that? Are you able to identify it? And what steps are you taking to mitigate that? So expect to have risk in business. Michael, question.
Hi, I've got a question about management team. So currently I'm from the management perspective, I'm a solo operation. Had a co-founder early on. He ended up not having the time to keep up with it. And so when it comes to seed round investing, how much, because I hear a lot of people talk about the management team and like to see teams, but how much of a setback is it to be solo? I want to find some management team members to join me. So the first question is, how much of a setback is it to be solo and in the seed round? And secondly, what are some ways to find potential people to join as managers when, in my personal circle that I already know, I don't have the candidates?
I can take a little bit of that. First, it's not a huge setback to be a solo entrepreneur, but one of the main things you want to focus on is how you're able to tell your story and articulate it, right? So why you? Why this idea? Why now? Right?
Yep.
And if you're able to articulate that effectively, you should also be able to articulate that to other stars, right? So getting buy-in from other people to buy into that dream is also going to be a similar exercise to getting buy-in from investors.
Yeah.
Right? So that would be, my suggestion is that you work on telling that story, articulating that story, why you, why now, why this idea. And then, finding, other people to work with, finding C-suite people, starters. That's really hard. I mean, it kind of depends on the idea. It depends on where the talent is. It would be, I would have to kind of tailor that specifically. I don't have a great answer for that.
Sure.
But I think that's all dependent on kind of the idea and where you're at and what you need to balance out your story.
Yeah.
I'll add a little bit to that. There are groups, angel groups, that will not invest in solo entrepreneurs. We're not one of them. We have a fair number of portfolio companies that are solo entrepreneurs, but, and here is the key. As a solo entrepreneur, if you're the single point of failure and you fail, the company fails. That's not acceptable from an investor standpoint. And by the way, I don't want to speak for Jim, but I believe he'd say that as well from a lender standpoint, which is if it's all comes down to you and there's no you, how do we get our money back? And
Sure.
that's a problem. So it's about you filling out not necessarily co-founders, but a C-suite, so that there is operational redundancy in a good redundant way, not in the bad, wasteful redundant, but that, and this is the analogy we use, so sorry, it's the hit by the bus phenomenon. We need to know if you as the founder are hit by the bus, that we at least know who is going to take on the mantle to go forward.
Yeah, we've actually run into that literally. And it wasn't that somebody got hit by a bus, but they did get hit by a car. And fortunately, when we were, they survived the accident. So I'll say that, and they're okay now, they're recovering. But they were not able to work for 6 months. Fortunately for them, their wife was involved in the business. But we didn't anticipate that up front, but it is something we tried to talk about. And so he added the wife as the business was growing and after we had made an investment. So it actually covered us to allow the business to continue to operate while he was recovering. And now they're active partners in the business. So it made a huge difference to look at that risk.
So I can imagine it's easier to find, new managers who come on once there's some funding to pay them, or at least pay them a little bit, and also offer some equity or so. But any suggestions for, well, even finding managers to come on? I mean, is it networking just in the local community to find recommendations when you're really looking for someone? Just talk to everyone you know and just start meeting and talking to people that way. Is there any other trick to it, or is it just that straightforward?
It's that straightforward, but Lawrence put his finger on it, which is ultimately part of what we invest in is your ability to integrate into a network, whether you're selling product or you're selling the company to investors or you're selling the company to potential hires or partners.
Yeah.
Those are all very, very similar skills, and we'd look for you to do that. So the recommendation I give is you look to your network, you look to your community, and then you look to the globally affected community. Because one of the things that we can really benefit from as a result of the pandemic is that it truly is a global village now. You can have a co-founder in wherever, because if your interaction with them is in a virtual world and your product is such that you don't need that first order contact, then your resource map just went global. So that's what we should be thinking about. And that's what, as investors, we're looking at is, look, for a decade or more, we've seen a lot of startups utilize tech resources that are offshore. Now, your fin resources could be offshore. There's no limit to that. We're looking for you to find those as best solutions, and that's what we look for the founder to be able to do. Local, broader community. If you've got a very, very deep tech company, you're going to have to look globally because you're only going to have a limited number of people that could actually understand what it is you're doing.
Sure.
And if you're not, and you're a small company, local-based company, you should be looking at these same solutions. In a lot of cases, they actually might be cheaper. And for the founder or the owner, my question is, do you want to grow? And if you want to grow, you're going to have to add employees or somebody providing these additional services at some point in time. And so, yes, it's difficult to hire quality employees. And you're going to have to go through the same thing that all the other companies that are out there going through, is the process. And I know that in this city, we know about the process. So.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay. All right. I have a couple other questions in here. And what I'm going to do, instead of me reading them, I'm going to ask the attendee who dropped it in the chat to ask the question themselves. So Erica, you have a great question. Why don't you ask the panel your question?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for your time. I am a founder and CEO of a medical device company. So my question is, obviously one of you touched on how long that road is to actually getting to commercialization. So definitely in the pre-revenue stage, how important is it to, how important is social impact in terms of you guys making a decision to invest in a company like a tech company, this pre-revenue? And if it's important, is it important to fit that into pitch presentations, given that they're, you know, oftentimes time constraints? So it's very difficult to really touch on a lot of points about the problem. How do you put value on that, though? Is that something you think would be important to relay?
Lawrence and Glenn, that's a tailor-made question for both of you.
Yeah, I can start off. So Social Venture Circle focuses a lot on impact. And we actually work a lot with a company called Impactable X, where we encourage companies, you know, impact companies to better articulate and quantify their impact, and try to figure out what KPIs, you know, you might have for as you increase in revenue with our investment, or as you go along your journey, what is the correlating impact that you'll have, right? So for example, you know, as much revenue as Tesla might have, or as many cars they might sell, there's also the correlating impact of what they can do in the world by taking one gas car out of the road and having an electric vehicle there, right? And as an impact investor, that's what we're looking for. We're not only looking for the best return, but we're also looking to have that impact. So I think it's final answer is that it's more important for you have to know what your audience is. If you're talking to someone, you know, that's philanthropic, you know, that has, like, you know, might be investing with a purpose related, you know, investment, or impact investor, I think it's definitely something that you should bring up, because, you know, they're not only thinking about what their return is going to be financially, but what the impact is going to be in the long term, or what the possible impact is. And they might say, you know, I might want to invest into this company as opposed to another company, because if it's successful, you know, the impact is, you know, maybe 5 times as great as another one. So I would say keep that in there, but I'd be interested to see what Glenn has to say.
Look, one of the fundamental differences is that Robinhood was created as an early stage investment organization first, whereas others are impact investors doing early stage. It's just a different approach to that. The two things I'd say to you is, every early stage investor is looking at a positive impact. The question just becomes, how does that get ranked on the priority scale in terms of the deals we'd want to do, versus how do we actually quantify that? It's pretty easy for us to say, okay, this is how big the addressable market is. You're going to capture this much of it. And, you know, as Lawrence threw out those mean words earlier, discounted cash flow analysis. You know, you can do those sorts of things. How do you then, though, measure impact? And, you know, the good people at SVC with some of their partners, they've got a formula to do that. We look at that differently. We want to invest in companies that are fundamentally changing the world, because those are the ones that we believe will be the most successful for us financially and will have the greatest impact. But we don't use impact in the same way that somebody who leads with impact does. So sometimes we end up in the same place, and that's one of the reasons why we're a common co-investor with SVC, and we're a common co-investor with other impact investors. But it becomes one of the lens through which we look at deals. So I want to add a little bit, because you're a medical, are you a device or are you a therapeutic, Erica?
A medical device.
Okay. When we look at medical devices, one of the big thoughts we have is, are there other ways to do this, right? Is this company going to fundamentally change, hopefully, outcomes favorably, right? That's what you want. You want better patient outcomes. And that's an impact in and of itself. And that's one of the ones that we would look at, but that's not usually something that the definition of an impact investor would necessarily consider. So it's impact as a category versus how does this impact well-being of a patient or somebody. Two different things. We'd like to look at both, but sometimes it can be difficult.
Great question, Erica, and great answers, both Glenn and Lawrence. It is now 1:15, and we'll be wrapping up shortly. Are there any last questions before we start approaching final comments?
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
Someone wrote something in as a question, but I actually that would pose that one too.
Sure, please do, Erica.
Are there who would you look to put metrics on social impact, like economists, accountants? Is there a platform that specifically like kind of quantifies that? And I know Lawrence said something about quantifying that earlier, but are there ways for early startups to kind of think about how that's quantified?
Yeah, sure. So we use a platform called Impactable X, and you would kind of look at them as a company that would consult you on, what you're selling, what the potential impact of it is from, a baseline standpoint, and then break that into units, and then so for example, you said you're a device product, right? So it would probably go to think about like, what is the impact per device, that, as opposed to the replacement or whatever you're replacing, right? Like, what is the replacement value of your device, right? And then we look at, what your projected revenue is, and then, or what your projected sales are. And then that way, if you multiply your projected sales of per device times what the replacement is, that's one way to indicate impact. But generally we go for, a holistic method. There's certainly a whole bunch of tertiary benefits outside of that, just kind of one metric. But we generally use, things like B-Lab, Iris, a lot of different things. So, but we usually use Impactable X as our person to go to for metrics.
Glenn?
I want to make a suggestion, because I want to hear more than we've got time for from Erica on this subject, because it does get back to the whole, if it's a medical device, does it potentially have a value that would not be discerned in terms of its efficacy taken over all humans, but if it enables equality of medical care in a way that's not possible, that's an impact metric that I'm not sure anybody evaluates. Lawrence, that's not the way Impact X looks at things. So I'm not sure there's anybody out there that's looking at, equality of care around impact.
I think you're right.
Yeah. And Glenn, thank you for that, because see, that was one of the goals of the programming that we're delivering here through OnRamp, as Glenn, as you just extended to Erica, and I'll make sure the two of you connect, is the opportunity for participants in the program and attending every week to establish relationships and reach out and look to Lawrence, Glenn, and Jim as a resource, whether you feel that you're ready for funding or not, have further discussion with you to establish the rapport necessary so that as you grow and scale this business venture that you're launching, you're going to need capital. And so it's important to have the relationships before you need it, so that they already understand where it is you're trying to go. At the end of the day, relationships, investment opportunities, lending decisions always come down to how comfortable and how good, as all of them have said in different ways tonight, how they feel about you. Lauren said, we look at the jockey, not the horse. Glenn has said it a number of times. And Jim also made it very clear, as the individual, we have to feel comfortable that you have a strategy to mitigate risk. So having the opportunity to connect with these three guys tonight is very important. And I encourage you to look at how to link up with them as you move along this journey with them in terms of building your business. So before we close out and move on to our next session, which is Startup Roundtable, I see Eamon is on already. What's going on, Eamon? I would just.
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good. So for closing comments, I'm Glenn, I'm gonna do you last because you've been doing a lot of talking in the last 15 minutes, but you've been very good at it. So I'm gonna do a little mix up. So Lawrence, for closing comments, what would you like to share, with the group tonight in terms of helping them understand, how to understand to do business with somebody like you in terms of accessing capital?
Sure. I would say first, really make sure, my main thing is about articulating your story effectively, right? I want to be able to understand, why you, why your team, why now, and are you going to be able to, really attack your niche market and really be able to have an idea that's defensible. As far as kind of reaching out to us, or me, I'm always available. I'll make sure that my information is available. If you want to talk to just getting investments from angel investors in general, I think it's generally important, to network and understand your market, your ecosystem, especially your city, right? So if you're looking for seed stage investors, someone like, Robinhood
is a comfortable place to raise family and live.
Social Venture Circle is very important to know about. Ben Franklin Technology Partners, extremely important to know about. Venture Cafe. So I would say you're already, majority of the way there. So continue to network, continue to articulate your story effectively, and keep pushing forward, be persistent.
Yeah, I would agree with that also, and also add on there that networking piece is so important, especially with potential investors, and to a certain extent, especially for the startup group, is being able to accept no. You're going to hear a lot of no's early on, and listen and kind of implement some of the ideas, or look at some of the ideas that people have made. Do they make sense for you? Not to say that you have to incorporate stuff, but just think about, does it make sense to do so? And if it does, kind of evaluate it and then see if you can get it in there. From us, it's really just about understanding your cash flow. And again, tell me how you make money. And because if you can understand how you make money, when you make money, is there seasonality in your business? So that when you're giving me financials and cash flow statements and that sort, you understand and can articulate it.
Man.
First thing you need to understand when you're talking to early stage investors is that no almost never means not ever. It means not now. So it is imperative on you, if an investor says no to you, for you to ask the follow-up question, what do I need to do? What does the company need to do to get to a yes for you? Okay, that's the first thing. I say no a lot. Jim's 100% right. And by the way, every investor, the easiest answer for an investor to give is yes, but it's the least valuable if I won't close the deal. So as a result, a lot of investors default to no with the, we expect you to have the pluck and the desire and the drive to change my mind, okay? But investors don't tell you that. They just say no, and if you walk away, you walk away, and there'll be 10 more that follow you in. So as a result, don't ever take no as never. Take it as not now and ask that follow-on question. The second thing is, prove me wrong. You pitch me, I'm going to ask you questions. Hopefully they're hard questions, and hopefully occasionally I stumble on one you haven't asked yourself yet. Okay? But it's your vision. As Lawrence said, you're the jockey. And you better know how you're going to run the race. And if I have a different view of that, prove me wrong. And if I don't invest in you and you're hugely successful, shame on me, but good for you for proving me wrong. Those are the two things I think you need to be able to do.
Gentlemen, thank you tonight for excellent discussion around accessing capital and the different ways we need to be thinking about how not only we look at money, how we evaluate risk, how we access cash, and how we build relationships that service us in terms of growing our business long term. This was an exciting conversation tonight. And before we get started, I'm going to, great discussion. Thanks. A lot of good comments in the group. Thanking you guys for the insight and information. As usual, everyone, you'll be able to connect with our panelists. You're just reaching out to Angelo or myself. And again, before we close, the pitch competition is now open, and submissions in terms of completing your application and submitting your video pitch is due tomorrow night at 11:59 p.m. Emily dropped the link again for the pitch competition for all the complete guidelines in the chat box. So please pull that link up if you're interested in participating. Minimum requirement, besides having complete the application and submitting your pitch video, is to have attended at least 6 of these workshops over the last 7 weeks. And again, $9,000 in award money, $5,000 to the first place, $2,500 to the second place, $15,000 to the third, including membership in the pack, as well as being connected with a mentor for 1 year. People like Glenn and Lawrence. Can you imagine not just having a 90-minute conversation, but having them on speed dial to help you grow your business over the next year? That's what we're offering right here at OnRamp. So without any further ado, if there's not any more questions, I'm going to hand it over to my colleagues at the Science Center. Eamon, Aaron, are you on?